Hi, welcome to my channel. I have a new story for you today.
My name is Jasmine Griffin. I was 42 years old when my sister tried to reclaim the daughter she handed to me 19 years ago. Savannah got pregnant at 17. My parents treated it like a stain on their country club membership. They said a baby would ruin Savannah's future, ruin our reputation in Dallas, ruin everything they had built. So they looked at me. I was 23, working an entry-level job as a legal clerk, barely paying rent on a studio apartment. I took her anyway. I raised Lily alone. I learned to stretch $20 to cover a week of groceries, negotiated payment plans for pediatric asthma medicine, and showed up to every parent-teacher conference solo. My sister went to college in Los Angeles, joined a sorority, spent her summers in Europe, and never once sent a birthday card. Then Lily graduated from high school as valedictorian. Savannah walked into that football stadium wearing a white tailored suit on the arm of a wealthy real estate mogul. She marched down the aisle, carrying a pink sheet cake, the frosting red. "Congratulations from your real mom." What my daughter did on that stage 10 minutes later made Savannah's new fiancé walk out, forced my mother to hide her face in shame, and made 3,000. Strangers erupt into a standing ovation. Before I tell you what happened, if you are drawn to stories about family dynamics and the boundaries we draw to survive them, take a second to like and subscribe. Drop a comment and tell me what city you are listening from and what time it is there. Let me take you back 19 years to a hospital waiting room in Dallas, Texas. It was 30 inches the morning. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Savannah was down the hall in the maternity ward. She was the golden child, a high school cheerleader with a perfect smile and a terrifying secret she had hidden under oversized sweaters for 6 months. My mother, Brenda, paced the linoleum floor. Brenda lived for two things: neighborhood gossip and maintaining appearances. To her, a teenage pregnancy was a social death sentence. My father, Richard, sat in a plastic chair, staring at the wall. The delivery was fast. When the nurse told us it was a girl, Brenda did not smile. She did not ask to hold her granddaughter. Instead, my father stood up, walked over to me, and delivered an ultimatum. "You take the baby, Jasmine," he said, his voice flat and clinical, "or she goes to the state tomorrow morning. Savannah has a life ahead of her. We are not letting this mistake define her." I stood there in my cheap work slacks, tired to my bones. I had no savings. I had never changed a diaper. But then the nurse walked out carrying a 6-pound girl wrapped in a standard-issue hospital blanket. I reached out and took her. She fit right against my chest. Quiet and warm. In one single night, my sister went back to being a carefree teenager. And I became a mother. I named her Lily. If you assume my parents offered any financial support after forcing me into sudden motherhood, you do not understand the mechanics of my family. Brenda and Richard viewed handing me the baby as the end of their obligation. They had preserved their social standing. The problem was solved, swept under a rug that happened to be the floor of my new home. I had to break the lease on my studio and scramble to find a place that would allow infants. I ended up in a cramped ground floor unit of a sprawling complex, pressed right against the Interstate 35 frontage road. The windows rattled every time an 1-8-wheeler hit their brakes. The wall air conditioning unit sputtered and dripped. Fighting a losing battle against the relentless Texas heat, I survived those early months on a diet of generic instant coffee and sheer adrenaline. I slept in 2-hour increments, waking up to the sound of Lily crying, heating bottles in a chipped mug of hot water because a microwave was a luxury I could not afford. My vision often blurred by 30 inches the afternoon at my clerk job. I learned to tape the worn soles of my sensible black shoes so they would last another season. I wore thrifted blouses that I washed in the bathroom sink and hung over the shower rod to dry. I tracked every single penny in a spiral notebook, calculating the exact cost per diaper, terrified of an unexpected expense. While I was mapping out the cheapest route to the grocery store, Savannah was mapping out her college experience. The contrast was not just unfair, it was suffocating. When Lily was 3 months old, I took the bus to my parents' house to retrieve an old wooden crib Brenda said I could have from the attic. I pushed Lily up the long manicured driveway in a secondhand stroller with a squeaky wheel. Sitting right in front of the 3-car garage was a pristine silver SUV. A giant velvet bow sat on the hood. Savannah was standing next to the driver's side door, posing for a picture while my father held a digital camera. Brenda clapped her hands, telling Savannah to tilt her head for a better angle. It was a graduation reward. Savannah had barely maintained a C average, but my parents insisted she needed a safe, reliable vehicle for her upcoming move to Los Angeles. I stood on the edge of the driveway, sweat dripping down the back of my neck, holding a teething infant. Nobody offered me a glass of water. Nobody asked if I needed a ride back to my apartment. My father helped me tie the disassembled crib to the roof of a taxi I had to pay for with my grocery money. Savannah honked the horn of her new car as the taxi pulled away. When Lily was 8 months old, Savannah packed up her silver SUV and drove to California. She enrolled in a private university and immediately set her sights on pledging one of the most exclusive sororities on campus. Her social media feeds filled with pictures of beach bonfires, matching themed outfits, and groups of smiling girls throwing Greek hand signs. She was living a teenage dream funded by my parents' bank accounts. I was living a grinding reality funded by a legal clerk's salary. I relied on a subsidized daycare center run by a woman who smelled of bleach and graham crackers, dropping Lily off at dawn and sprinting to catch the downtown bus. The turning point came during the first hard freeze of January. Lily spiked a high fever in the middle of the night. Her breathing turned shallow and raspy. I wrapped her in a blanket and ran to the nearest urgent care clinic. The waiting room smelled of rubbing alcohol and old magazines. When I reached the front desk, the receptionist slid a clipboard across the glass counter. She looked over her reading glasses and asked for my insurance card and proof of legal guardianship. My heart hit my ribs. I told her I was the aunt, but I was the primary caregiver. The receptionist frowned, explaining that without legal guardianship or a signed medical consent form from the biological mother, the doctor could only provide basic emergency stabilization. They could not prescribe the specialized breathing treatments Lily needed. I stood under the harsh fluorescent lights, clutching a burning hot infant to my chest, realizing a terrifying truth. I was doing all the work, carrying all the burden. Yet, in the eyes of the law, Lily was a stranger to me. My sister, R000M, away in a dorm room, held the power over this child's medical care. I vowed right then to strip her of that power. The next morning, I walked into the corner office of the senior partner at my law firm. Mr. Henderson was a sharp, intimidating man who charged hundreds of dollars an hour. But he had noticed me skipping lunch to organize the filing room. I told him my situation. I did not cry. I did not ask for pity. I asked for the paperwork to protect my niece. He drafted the documents pro bono by the end of the week. The header on the crisp white paper read, "Voluntary relinquishment of parental rights." It was a dense, ironclad legal document that severed all biological claims, granting me full, uncontested legal guardianship. I called Savannah on a Tuesday evening. I could hear music thumping in the background. She was breathless, laughing at something off camera before she focused on my voice. I explained the paperwork to her. I told her it was necessary for medical insurance and school enrollment. I braced myself for hesitation. I thought perhaps hearing the words relinquish and sever might trigger some buried maternal instinct. I thought she might pause. She did not pause. She sounded annoyed by the interruption. She told me she was in the middle of sorority rush week, coordinating a massive Greek mixer, and did not have time to fly back to Texas for a court date. I told her she just needed to sign the documents in front of a notary. She sighed into the receiver. They told me to email the file to the printing center on campus and promised she would squeeze it in between rush events. 3 days later, I stood next to the humming fax machine in the law firm copy room. The green light blinked. The dial tone screeched, and a warm sheet of paper slid onto the plastic tray. I picked it up. There was Savannah's signature looped and rushed in black ink stamped by a California notary public. She had signed away her biological child. There was no cover sheet. There was no sticky note asking how Lily was feeling after her fever. There was no inquiry about whether I needed money for formula or rent. There was only a signature buying her freedom so she could attend a toga party without a guilty conscience. I held that warm piece of paper and felt a strange mixture of disgust and overwhelming relief. I drove straight to a pawn shop after work and bought a heavy steel fireproof safe. I lugged it into my apartment, pushed it under my bed, and placed the notarized documents inside. I turned the combination dial and heard the heavy metallic click of the lock engaging. Those papers became my silent armor. They were proof that when the burden became real, Savannah chose herself. I thought locking those papers away meant the hard part was over. I thought the law would shield us from the toxicity of my family tree. But the law only protects you in a courtroom. It does nothing to protect a little girl when she gets old enough to look around a crowded holiday dinner table and realize she is the only person the family refuses to acknowledge. Legal papers secured inside a steel box provided a vital technical boundary. But a notarized signature did not change the brutal rhythm of a Tuesday morning. The first 5 years of Lily's life were a masterclass in relentless grinding survival. I operated on a schedule so tight it felt like walking a tightrope without a net over a concrete floor. My alarm went off at 4:30 every single day. The routine was always the same. Make the cheap instant coffee iron, the single pair of professional slacks that still fit properly. Pack the diaper bag, and bundle a sleeping toddler into a second-hand car seat before the sun even considered rising over the Dallas skyline to afford rent and basic utilities. I took on every extra hour the law firm would allow. That meant double shifts. When the attorneys went home to their pristine suburban houses at 60 inches the evening, I descended into the basement archives. It was a windowless cavern lined with metal shelving, smelling faintly of ozone and decaying paper. I spent my nights organizing thousands of pages of discovery files for corporate litigation, running high-speed scanners until my fingers were raw with paper cuts and my vision blurred. I would clock out at midnight, pick Lily up from a neighbor who watched her for $20 a night, and carry her sleeping weight back into our apartment. Exhaustion became a permanent hum in my blood, a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders. But I never resented the work. The work was the only thing keeping a roof over our heads. Financial survival required a level of mental mathematics I had never practiced before. Every trip to the grocery store was a strategic operation. I walked the aisles with a calculator in my hand. I ate generic ramen noodles 5 days a week, boiling the stiff bricks of pasta in a dented aluminum pot, just so my grocery budget could stretch a little further. That sacrifice meant Lily could have the fresh strawberries she loved. It meant I could afford the premium hypoallergenic brand of diapers that kept her sensitive skin from breaking out in painful rashes. I learned how to ignore the low ache of my own hunger, replacing it with the profound satisfaction of watching my niece devour a bowl of fresh fruit. Holidays were an exercise in creative desperation. When Lily was 3 years old, December arrived with a bitter chill and an empty bank account. I had managed to save exactly $14 for Christmas gifts. I bought a small wooden train set and a stuffed bear from a discount store. I stood in the aisle staring at the rolls of shiny foil wrapping paper, realizing that buying a single roll meant I would not have enough money for our bus fare the next morning. I walked out without it. That night, sitting on the threadbare carpet of our living room, I wrapped Lily's presents in the Sunday comic section of the newspaper. I used a roll of cheap Scotch tape and tied them with a piece of leftover red yarn. The next morning, Lily tore into that brightly colored newspaper with a joy so pure and unfiltered it cracked my heart wide open. She did not know we were poor. She only knew she was cherished. While I was taping together comic strips in a drafty apartment, Savannah was experiencing a vastly different reality. Her existence was underwritten by an endless, bottomless parental ledger. During Lily's third summer, while the Texas heat pushed above 100 degrees, and our wall air conditioning unit finally surrendered, Savannah was in Europe. She posted pristine photos from Mkos, posing on white balconies overlooking the Ion Sea. She drank champagne in Paris and took sailing lessons off the coast of Italy. Brenda and Richard funded every flight, every hotel, every designer sundress. Not once during those 5 years did my sister send a birthday card. Not once did a package arrive for Lily. The mailbox remained entirely empty of any acknowledgement from the woman whose DNA mapped my daughter's face. My parents were equally absent. They lived a 40-minute drive away in a sprawling gated community. Yet, they never once offered to babysit so I could sleep. They never dropped off a casserole. They functioned under a strict code of intentional amnesia, treating Lily's existence as a closed chapter. They simply refused to read. Their only involvement came when my existence threatened to puncture their carefully curated social bubble. I was standing at the pharmacy counter one evening in late October. Lily had developed a sharp, rattling cough that flared up with the changing seasons. The pediatrician prescribed a pediatric asthma inhaler. I handed my debit card to the technician, watching her type the information into the register. The machine beeped a harsh, rejecting sound. The card declined. The cost of the medication had jumped, and my account was $7 short. I stood there under the bright fluorescent lights, the heat of profound humiliation rising in my cheeks. A line of customers formed behind me. I felt the familiar spike of panic, the terrifying realization that I could not provide the oxygen my child needed to breathe comfortably. I swallowed my pride, looked the pharmacist in the eye, and asked if there was any possible way to set up a payment plan for the remaining balance. He was a kind older man with tired eyes. He paid the difference out of his own pocket, sliding the paper bag across the counter with a quiet nod. I walked out of that pharmacy, gripping the inhaler like a lifeline, my chest tight with a mixture of immense gratitude and bitter anger. My phone rang the moment I buckled Lily into her car seat. The caller ID flashed my mother's name. A foolish, naive part of my brain thought perhaps Brenda possessed some maternal radar. Perhaps she was calling to check on us. I answered the phone, clearing the strain from my throat. "Jasmine, take the photo down," Brenda said. No greeting. No asking how my day was. Just a sharp, commanding directive. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. "What photo?" "Mom, the picture you posted on Facebook this morning," she snapped. "The one of you and the child at the park. Savannah is entering her senior year. She is rushing a prestigious alumni society, and several of the board members follow our family accounts. We cannot afford to have questions arise about who that little girl belongs to. It creates unnecessary confusion. Deleted immediately." I stared out the windshield at the flickering neon sign of the pharmacy. My mother was not calling because she cared about her granddaughter's health. She was calling to enforce an eraser. She was demanding that I digitally hide the child I had just humiliated myself to buy medicine for, all to protect Savannah from a minor social inconvenience. In my family, if you were not the golden child, You were worse than invisible. You were a liability. I did not argue. Arguing with Brenda was like screaming at a brick wall and expecting it to apologize. I ended the call, opened the application on my phone, and deleted the picture of Lily smiling on the swing set. I turned off the engine, rested my forehead against the cold steering wheel, and let a few quiet tears spill over my eyelashes. Then a small hand reached forward from the back seat and touched my shoulder. I turned around. Lily was watching me. Her dark eyes, so perceptive and sharp, even at 4 years old, locked onto mine. She did not ask why I was crying. She just offered me her half-eaten graham cracker, pressing it into my palm with profound, silent solidarity. That was the moment I realized the truth. My parents refused to see me. My sister refused to acknowledge me. But Lily saw me. She saw every sacrifice, every late night, every quiet tear, and she loved me with a fierce, unconditional loyalty that my biological family could never comprehend. That gaze became the only fuel I required to keep moving forward. I started the car, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove us home, unaware that the quiet bond we were building was about to shift into something permanent, setting the stage for a conversation that would alter my identity forever. The days blur when you are raising a child alone on a clerk's salary. You measure time, not in years, but in milestones of survival. Before I knew it, the infant who needed midnight breathing treatments grew into a sharp, fiercely observant kindergartner. Lily was the kind of 6-year-old who noticed the invisible currents of the world. She read early. She watched how strangers interacted in the grocery store aisles. She saw the way other mothers held their children at the school drop-off line. Most dangerously, she noticed the spaces where things were missing. Kindergarten is a minefield for non-traditional families. The curriculum is built on standard assumptions. Teachers hand out worksheets, asking students to draw their family trees. I remember picking Lily up on a damp Tuesday afternoon. She was holding a piece of construction paper while the other kids drew sprawling webs of grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles, and siblings. Lily had drawn a tree with only 2 branches. One tall figure with dark hair holding a briefcase, and one small figure holding a book. She handed it to me without a word. I hung it on our apartment refrigerator right next to the past due electric bill. It was a beautiful drawing, but it forced me to realize the quiet isolation my niece was processing in her own mind. The real damage did not come from the classroom. It came from the rare mandated visits to my parents' sprawling Dallas estate. Brenda demanded our presence perhaps twice a year, usually for a brief afternoon around a minor holiday. These visits were never born of genuine affection. They were calculated exercises designed to maintain the illusion of a proper, intact family for the neighbors. Walking into that house was like entering a museum dedicated to a single celebrated exhibit. The subject was Savannah. The walls of the grand curving staircase were lined with custom silver frames. Savannah in her high school cheerleading uniform. Savannah posing by a fountain in Rome during her summer abroad. Savannah wearing her sorority letters on a pristine California beach. A massive mahogany credenza in the formal dining room held professional portraits of my sister at every stage of her life. During our brief Easter visit that year, I watched Lily wander down the long carpeted hallway. She stopped in front of a console table crowded with photographs. Her small hands gripped the edge of the polished wood. She scanned the faces. She looked at the stone mantel above the fireplace. She looked at the grand piano in the corner. There was not a single trace of her existence in that entire house. Not a school photo. Not a crayon drawing. Not a candid snapshot from a birthday party. She was a ghost, walking through her own grandparents' living room. We drove back to our cramped apartment in total silence. I gripped the steering wheel. my jaw tight with a quiet, burning fury. I wanted to protect her from that blatant rejection, but I could not blindfold her to the reality of the walls. The reckoning happened on a rainy Friday night. We were sitting on the faded, scratchy carpet of our tiny living room. The cheap television was turned down low, casting a blue light across the room. We were eating macaroni and cheese from a cardboard box, the kind with the bright orange powder. It was our weekly tradition. We sat cross-legged on the floor using the chipped coffee table as a dining surface. Lily set her plastic fork down. The television light flickered across her face. Her big brown eyes looked up at me far too serious for a child who had just lost her front teeth. "Jasmine," she asked. Her voice, quiet but piercing. "Why does Grandma only have pictures of Aunt Savannah? Why are there no pictures of me?" It was the kind of question that stops the air in your lungs. My chest tightened. I looked down at the bowl of pasta, trying to swallow the sudden, sharp lump forming in my throat. How do you explain the concept of a golden child to a 6-year-old? How do you explain that her biological mother was a social inconvenience they wanted to bury, and she was the living evidence they wanted to erase? You do not explain it. You build a shield. I set my own fork down and reached across the coffee table to take her small hand. "Grandma is complicated." "Sweetie," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady and warm. "Sometimes people only display the things they understand. But you do not need to worry about the walls in that house because you have me. You will always have me. Every wall in my heart is covered in pictures of you." Lily stared at me. She did not cry. She possessed a stoic resilience that often terrified me. She was processing the heavy weight of my words, measuring the cold reality of her grandparents against the warm, undeniable certainty of my grip on her hand. She looked down at the orange noodles, then back up at my face. "Then is it okay if I just call you Mom?" The air left the room. For 6 years, I had been Aunt Jasmine. I had signed the daycare forms as her legal guardian. I had filed the heavy paperwork in the fireproof, safe to sever her biological ties. But a legal decree is just paper. This was different. This was a child consciously choosing her parent. I could not hold back the tears. They spilled hot and fast down my cheeks. I pushed the coffee table aside, pulled her into my lap, and wrapped my arms around her small frame. I buried my face in her dark hair, breathing in the scent of cheap strawberry shampoo and pure childhood. "Yes," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Yes. You can call me Mom." We sat on the floor of that drafty apartment and held each other. In that tight embrace, the final ghost of my sister vanished from our daily lives. Savannah was just a stranger living on the West Coast. I was the mother. I had earned the title through sleep deprivation, generic groceries, and fierce, uncompromising protection. No one was ever going to strip that title away from me. Calling me Mom changed the fundamental dynamic of our household. It provided Lily with an unbreakable anchor. She stopped asking questions about the woman in Los Angeles. She stopped looking for her face on Brenda's pristine walls. She knew exactly who she belonged to, and that profound certainty gave me a new level of ruthless ambition. I was no longer just surviving to pay the monthly rent. I was building an empire for my daughter. I threw myself into my career with terrifying focus. Over the next 4 years, I outworked every single clerk in the Dallas firm. I memorized dense case files, anticipated the senior partner's legal strategies, and passed the rigorous paralegal certification exams on my first try. By the time Lily turned 10, my salary had tripled. I earned the title of senior paralegal, complete with a glass office and a matching salary. I marched into the leasing office of our complex, handed them the keys to that noisy ground floor apartment, and drove us away from the interstate forever. I bought us a beautiful, A modest three-bedroom house in a quiet tree-lined Dallas suburb. It had a backyard with a mature oak tree. It had a proper dining room table where we could eat our Friday dinners. We painted Lily's bedroom a bright, cheerful yellow. We were thriving. We had built a stable, prosperous life without a single dime or word of encouragement from my family tree. I felt invincible. I looked at my growing bank account, my respected career, and my brilliant 10-year old daughter and I made a critical miscalculation. I believed my newfound financial success would force my parents to respect us. I believed that because I had elevated our social standing and proved my competence, Brenda might finally offer us a legitimate seat at the family table. That naive, lingering hope led me to accept an invitation to Thanksgiving dinner at their country club estate. I walked through their front door, expecting a truce, setting the stage for the most brutal public eraser we would ever face. Walking into that Dallas estate on Thanksgiving Day was my greatest tactical error. I had allowed my new senior paralegal title and my suburban deed to cloud my judgment. I believe my financial independence would act as a shield. I thought Brenda and Richard would look at the articulate, well-dressed 10-year-old girl standing beside me and finally feel a shred of pride. Instead, I walked into a curated performance. My parents were not hosting a quiet family holiday. The circular driveway was choked with luxury sedans. Brenda had invited half the board of her country club. The foyer smelled of catered truffles and expensive floral arrangements. Waitstaff in crisp white shirts circulated with silver trays of champagne. Standing by the grand fireplace holding a crystal flute was Savannah. She had flown in from Los Angeles the night before. Addoazech, shishase. My sister looked like a magazine editorial. She wore a silk dress, the color of champagne, her hair styled in effortless waves. She was currently between her first and second brief marriages, living a frantic, hollow party lifestyle that my parents continued to fund without question. When Lily and I stepped into the living room, Savannah glanced in our direction. Her eyes swept over my tailored suit, dropped to the 10-year-old girl standing beside me, and then moved right past us to greet a man wearing a cashmere sweater. She did not say hello. She did not wave. Savannah looked right through her own biological child, as if Lily were a hired coat check attendant. I felt Lily step closer to my side. I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, silently cursing myself for bringing her into this snake pit. I steered us toward the quietest corner of the room, intending to eat a polite plate of food, and immediately excuse ourselves. We stood near the towering windows, overlooking the manicured lawn, drinking sparkling cider in silence. Then Brenda noticed us. My mother possessed a terrifying ability to command a room. She glided across the Turkish rug, trailed by three wealthy women draped in diamonds and silk. Brenda wore a fixed, flawless smile. She placed a hand on my arm, gripping it tight enough to leave a mark, and turned me toward her friends. "Jasmine, darling," Brenda chimed, her voice pitched perfectly to project across the gathering. "I am so glad you could make it. You work those long hours at that law firm. We barely see you." One of the women, a woman named Mrs. Davenport, with severe cheekbones and a judging stare, peered over the rim of her wineglass. Her gaze landed on Lily. Lily was wearing a beautiful navy blue velvet dress we had picked out together for the occasion. She looked poised and smart. "And who is this precious little thing, Mrs. Davenport asked. "I do not believe I have seen her at the club." The air in the room seemed to halt. I opened my mouth to introduce my daughter. I was going to say her name with the fierce pride I felt every single day. Brenda cut me off. She did not miss a single beat. She offered a tight conspiratorial sigh, the kind of sound a person makes when discussing a minor inconvenience. like a scuffed shoe or a late delivery. "Oh," Brenda said, waving her hand dismissively. "This is Savannah's little mistake from high school. Jasmine is watching her for now." Watching her for now. The words hung in the air, toxic and heavy. My mother had just reduced a decade of my blood, sweat, and tears to a temporary babysitting gig. She had just reduced a brilliant breathing, 10-year-old girl to a dirty secret. She said it loudly, confidently, expecting me to nod along and play my role in her social script. I did not look at Brenda. I looked down at Lily. I watched my 10-year-old daughter's shoulders drop. The bright spark in her brown eyes extinguished instantly. She folded her small hands in front of her velvet dress and stared down at her shiny black shoes. She shrank into herself, internalizing the brutal message that she was nothing more than an error waiting to be corrected. A cold, crystalline clarity washed over me. There was no argument to be had here. There was no point in raising my voice or causing a scene. You cannot negotiate with people who view you as props. I did not say a word to Mrs. Davenport. I did not look at my mother. I set my glass of sparkling cider down on a nearby side table with a sharp, decisive clink. I reached down and took Lily by the hand. My grip was firm and steady. "Come on, sweetie," I said, my voice low and calm. "We are leaving." "Jasmine, do not be dramatic," Brenda hissed, her flawless smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "The caterers are about to carve the turkey. You are embarrassing me in front of my guests." I turned my head just enough to catch my mother's eye. I let her see the dead, quiet finality in my stare. "You embarrass yourself." "Brenda." I did not wait for a response. I led Lily past the grand fireplace. I walked right past Savannah, who was laughing loudly at a joke someone had just told. We walked through the heavy front doors, down the pristine brick steps, and into the crisp November air. I strapped Lily into the back seat of my car, climbed into the driver's seat, and hit the gas. We left the country club estate in our rearview mirror before the dining room doors even opened for dinner. The drive back toward our side of Dallas was silent. The radio was off. I could hear the faint sound of Lily sniffling in the back seat. My heart felt like it was cracking against my ribs. I had promised to protect her, and I had marched her right into a firing squad. I did not drive us home. I pulled off the highway and parked in front of a bright neon-lit diner. It was a classic Texas diner, smelling of fried food and strong coffee. The kind of place where nobody cared what your last name was or what country club you belonged to. We sat in a red vinyl booth. The waitress handed us 2 sticky laminated menus. I did not look at the food. I ordered 2 large chocolate milkshakes and a plate of French fries. When the waitress walked away, I slid across the booth, so I was sitting right next to Lily. I put my arm around her. She leaned her head against my shoulder, the velvet of her dress catching on the fabric of my suit. "I am so sorry I took you there," I whispered into her hair. She looked up at me, her eyes rimmed with red. "Am I a mistake?" "Mom," the word gutted me. I took her face in both my hands, making sure she had nowhere to look but directly into my eyes. "You listen to me, Lily Griffin," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You are my daughter. You are brilliant. And you are wanted. And you are loved. Grandma is an empty, sad person who only cares about what other people think. We do not need her. We do not need any of them." The waitress brought our milkshakes in tall glass cups, topped with whipped cream and cherries. I slid one in front of Lily. "I promise you," I said, raising my own glass, "we will never subject ourselves to that poison again. That part of our life is over." We are our family. Just you and me. Lily grabbed a French fry, dipped it into her milkshake, and took a bite. She offered a small, genuine smile. Just you and me. She echoed. I kept that promise. I built a fortress around us. I blocked my parents' phone numbers for months at a time. I ignored Savannah's rare performative text messages on major holidays. For the next 6 years, we lived entirely on our own terms. I watched my daughter transform from a quiet one, 0-year-old, into a fierce, independent one, 6-year-old. She was a force of nature. She pulled straight grades, devoured thick history books, and argued with the precision of a seasoned trial lawyer on her high school debate team. We were safe. We were untouchable. Or so I thought. I underestimated the insidious nature of modern technology. I forgot that you do not need to walk through the front doors of a toxic household to let the poison in. Sometimes the poison slips right through the screen of a cell phone delivered in a digital format that you cannot unsee. Just when Lily was finding her voice, my family found a new way to remind us that they still viewed her as a rented accessory, sparking a silent rage that would carry us straight to graduation day. 6 years of silence can build a very comfortable fortress. After that disastrous Thanksgiving, I held true to my promise. We lived in our own world, insulated from the country club gossip and the curated photo albums. Fast forward to Lily's junior year of high school. The fragile 0-year-old girl in the velvet dress was gone. In her place stood a brilliant, fiercely independent 6-year-old who commanded every room she entered. Lily was pulling straight grades in advanced placement classes. She spent her weekends in tailored blazers, dominating regional debate tournaments. She possessed a terrifying ability to dismantle an opponent's argument with a calm, surgical precision. I spent my evenings sitting in the bleachers of high school auditoriums, watching my daughter articulate complex political theories, feeling a pride so deep it anchored my soul to the floor. We had a routine. We had peace. I was working a hybrid schedule for the law firm, drafting legal briefs from the quiet sanctuary of our suburban kitchen. Then came a rainy Tuesday afternoon in early October. I was standing at the granite kitchen island, reviewing a stack of depositions, waiting for the familiar sound of Lily unlocking the front door. She usually burst into the house talking about her history teacher or what happened at lunch. That afternoon, the door opened and she walked in with a chilling, unnatural silence. She dropped her heavy canvas backpack onto the hardwood floor. She did not take off her jacket. She walked straight to the kitchen island, pulled her smartphone from her pocket, and slid it across the smooth granite surface. The device stopped right on top of my legal documents. "You need to see this," she said. Her voice was eerily calm. It lacked any trace of teenage dramatic flair. It was the voice of a seasoned attorney presenting a damning piece of evidence. I looked down at the bright screen. It was an image file, a screenshot forwarded by my cousin Megan. Megan was a few years older than Savannah, someone who floated on the periphery of the family social circle, but harbored a quiet distaste for my mother's antics. Megan had taken a screenshot of a private group text thread titled Family Updates and sent it directly to Lily with a note that simply read, "I am so sorry. I thought you should know what they are saying." I zoomed in on the text bubbles. The first message was from Savannah. I had not seen or spoken to my sister in years. Her contact photo was a glamorous shot of her holding a martini glass. "I will probably take Lily back when I get settled down." Savannah had typed, "It will be nice to have a teenager to hang out with, especially without having to do the diaper phase." I stopped breathing. I read the sentence again. The diaper phase. My sister had summarized 16 years of grueling, relentless labor into a 3-word dismissal. She equated the midnight asthma attacks, the pediatric bills, the parent-teacher conferences, and the quiet sacrifices of my entire adult life to a minor inconvenience she had cleverly outsourced. She spoke about my daughter as if Lily were a winter coat left in storage, ready to be picked up from the dry cleaner the moment the weather turned chilly. My eyes moved to the next text bubble. It was from Brenda. Of course. Sweetheart, my mother replied. Jasmine knows it is only temporary. She has always understood her role. It will be a wonderful reunion when you are ready. If you have ever poured your entire soul into building something, only to watch someone else casually claim ownership of your work, you know exactly what happened in my chest. A surge of violent protective rage flooded my veins. It was a primal, blinding heat. For 16 years, they had viewed my daughter as a rented accessory. They genuinely believed I was nothing more than an unpaid nanny holding a placeholder for the golden child. I slammed my hand down on the granite counter. The coffee mug rattled. I reached for my car keys sitting in the ceramic bowl by the door. I did not care that it was raining. I did not care about rush hour traffic on the Dallas tollway. I was going to drive straight to that sprawling estate, kick the heavy oak front doors off their hinges, and shatter every single silver picture frame in that pristine hallway. I was going to force them to look at the legal guardianship papers I had kept locked in a safe for over a decade. I wanted to burn their entire delusion to the ground. I took one step toward the hallway. Then a hand wrapped around my wrist. It was Lily. She stepped into my path. Blocking my way to the door, I looked down at her face, expecting to see tears, or the crushed devastation she had shown at the country club years ago. I saw neither. Her dark eyes were steady, clear, and older than her 16 years. Do not, she said softly. Lily, you cannot expect me to just sit here and read this, I argued, my voice shaking with raw anger. They are talking about you like you are a piece of furniture. I'm going to put a stop to this right now. She squeezed my wrist, grounding me in the present moment. She shook her head. They are not worth the gas money. Mom. I stared at her, stunned by the cold, rational weight of her words. Let them live in their delusions. Lily continued her tone. Even and pragmatic. Going over there just gives them what they want. It gives them drama. It makes them feel important. They are strangers to me. You do not scream at strangers for saying stupid things. You just ignore them. I let go of the keys. They dropped back into the ceramic bowl with a dull clatter. I looked at the incredible young woman standing in my kitchen. She had not internalized their rejection. She had analyzed it, recognized its sheer absurdity, and categorized it as irrelevant data. My daughter had outgrown the need for their approval. She was offering me the same liberation. I pulled her into a tight embrace. We stood in the kitchen, listening to the rain hit the windows, letting the rage slowly dissolve into profound pity. We deleted the screenshot. We blocked Megan from sending any more updates. We chose to protect our peace, operating under the assumption that Savannah was just running her mouth to our mother, spinning idle fantasies to make herself feel maternal without doing any of the actual work. We thought the group chat was just an echo chamber of narcissism. We thought they would stay on their side of the city contained within their country club walls, leaving us alone to finish high school in peace. We were wrong. Savannah was not just daydreaming about having a teenage daughter. She was actively setting a stage. Her frantic, expensive party lifestyle in Los Angeles had finally hit a wall. She was approaching her late 30s. Her trust fund access was tightening, and she needed a drastic rebrand to secure her next meal ticket. We did not know it that rainy afternoon. But Savannah had just hooked the biggest fish of her life. She needed to present an image of a tragic, separated mother to seal the deal. The text messages were not a fantasy. They were a strategic business plan. And she was about to bring her campaign right to our front porch. The text messages we discovered on that rainy afternoon were not born of sudden dormant maternal instinct. They were the opening moves of a highly calculated public relations campaign. We soon learned that Savannah had quietly relocated from Los Angeles back to Texas. Her frantic, sun-soaked lifestyle on the West Coast had finally reached its expiration date. A 13 she chasse. She was aging out of the party scene. Her 2 brief marriages had ended in swift, quiet annulments that yielded very little financial gain. The parental trust fund she treated like an infinite well was finally showing its limits. Savannah needed a permanent, unbreakable financial anchor, and she found one in the shape of a Dallas commercial real estate tycoon named Preston. Preston represented old money. He was a man who owned towering glass office buildings downtown and spent his weekends attending conservative charity galas. He belonged to the kind of social circles where a man's worth was measured by his portfolio and the flawless, traditional family standing at his side. Preston valued legacy. He expected a partner who mirrored his rigid, pristine image. Savannah recognized instantly that her actual resume would send a man like Preston running in the opposite direction. A history of club-hopping, impulsive divorces, and abandoning a newborn to attend sorority mixers did not align with his strict family values. She could not hide the fact that she had given birth. Too many people in our overlapping social circles knew the truth. If Preston found out she had tossed her own daughter to her sister without a second thought, his conservative sensibilities would be repulsed. The diamond ring she so desperately coveted would vanish. Savannah needed to rewrite her own history. She needed to construct a narrative where she was not the villain of her own life, but a tragic, misunderstood heroine. Through the network of gossiping cousins, the details of Savannah's new performance filtered back to me. She was spinning a breathtaking web of lies. She told Preston that she had been a frightened, vulnerable teenager when she got pregnant. She claimed that our domineering parents and her cruel, overbearing older sister had orchestrated a hostile takeover of her life. She painted me as a bitter, jealous woman who used legal loopholes to steal her baby while she was suffering from postpartum trauma. Savannah convinced this wealthy, powerful man that she had spent the last 17 years grieving in silence. Legally blocked from seeing the child she desperately wanted to raise. She transformed herself into the grieving mother. She started wearing conservative pearl necklaces and demure blazers to his country club dinners. She ordered sparkling water instead of her usual martinis. Preston, entirely captivated by her flawless performance and blinded by his own savior complex, swallowed the story hook, line, and sinker. He believed he was courting a resilient woman who had survived a tyrannical family. He encouraged her to fight for her daughter. He wanted to help her rebuild her shattered family unit. But a compelling story requires evidence. Preston expected to see Savannah actively trying to bridge the gap with the child she claimed to love. Savannah had a glaring problem. She had zero contact with Lily. She had no photographs, no recent updates, no proof of any maternal effort. She needed to generate receipts. She needed to manufacture a paper trail of devotion to show her new fiancé. That is when the digital haunting began. It started 6 months before Lily was set to graduate. We were sitting in the living room on a quiet Sunday evening. Lily was curled up on the sofa studying for her advanced placement calculus exam while I reviewed property deeds on my laptop. Lily's phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with an Instagram notification. She picked up the device, her brow furrowing in confusion. She stared at the screen for a long moment, the soft glow illuminating her face. "What is it?" I asked, sensing the sudden shift in the room. Lily turned the screen toward me. Savannah had just liked a photograph. It was not a recent picture. It was a photo from a debate tournament Lily had posted 2 years prior. A few seconds later, the phone buzzed again. Another like. This time, on a picture from her sophomore homecoming dance. Then a third notification flashed. Savannah had liked a post of Lily holding her driver's license at the Department of Motor Vehicles. For 17 years, my sister had operated as a ghost. Now she was deliberately dragging her fingers across my daughter's digital life, leaving fingerprints to prove she was there. It is a profound psychological intrusion when someone who abandoned you suddenly demands to be seen. Savannah was not reaching out with a genuine apology. She was not asking how Lily was doing. She was just clicking a button, invading our quiet sanctuary through a glowing screen. She wanted Lily to see her name. She wanted to stir the pot, hoping to provoke an emotional response that she could screenshot and twist to fit her victim narrative. Lily did not give her the satisfaction. My daughter possessed a quiet, ruthless pragmatism. She did not cry. She did not type out an angry message demanding answers. She tapped her screen 3 times, navigating to Savannah's profile, and permanently blocked the account. "Nice try," Lily murmured, tossing the phone back onto the coffee table and returning her focus to her calculus textbook. I watched her solve a complex equation, my heart swelling within fierce protective pride. She was unshakable, but I knew Savannah well enough to know that a digital block would not stop her. Savannah was performing for an audience of 1, and Preston required physical proof of her maternal struggle. The escalation arrived 3 weeks later, wrapped in festive red paper. It was the second week of December. I walked out to the mailbox at the end of our driveway. Nestled between the electric bill and a stack of grocery circulars was a thick, square envelope. The return address belonged to an upscale high-rise building in downtown Dallas. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was the same rushed looping script that had signed the relinquishment papers in a FedEx store 17 years ago. I carried the envelope into the kitchen and laid it on the granite counter. When Lily came home from school, I pointed to the red square. She picked it up, inspected the return address, and sliced it open with a paring knife. Inside was a generic mass-produced holiday greeting card. The printed text read, "Wishing you joy in the new year." Beneath the printed words, Savannah had written a single line, "Thinking of you always. Love. Mom." Tucked inside the fold of the card was a piece of plastic. It was a $50 Starbucks gift card. Lily stared at the plastic card. She did not look angry. She looked profoundly tired. "A gift card," Lily said, her voice dropping to a flat, cynical octave. 17 years of nothing, and she thinks my forgiveness costs $50 in overpriced coffee. I stared at the word mom written in black ink. The audacity of claiming that title on a piece of cardstock made my stomach churn. Savannah had never wiped a feverish brow. She had never stayed up until dawn, helping build a science fair project. She had never sat in a sterile waiting room, praying for a diagnosis. She had simply walked into a coffee shop, handed a cashier a $50 bill, and decided that transaction earned her the right to claim my daughter. "She did not send this for you, sweetie," I said, leaning against the counter. "She sent it so she could keep the receipt. She sent it so she can sit across from her wealthy boyfriend at dinner tonight. Pull out her phone and say, 'Look, Preston, I sent my daughter a Christmas gift, but my family continues to freeze me out. It is a prop for her play.'" Lily nodded slowly, understanding the grim mechanics of the manipulation. She walked over to the stainless steel trash can, stepped on the pedal, and dropped the card, the envelope, and the plastic gift card right into the garbage. "We do not accept bribes," Lily said, washing her hands at the sink. We thought the silence that followed the rejected gift card meant Savannah had given up. We assumed she would find another way to manipulate Preston, perhaps faking an illness or inventing a new family tragedy To keep his attention focused on her, we underestimated her desperation. Savannah was running out of time. Preston was beginning to push for a meeting with the daughter she claimed to love so fiercely. He wanted to help facilitate the reunion. He wanted to be the hero who brought Savannah's fractured family back together before he put a ring on her finger. The digital likes and the cheap gift cards were just the rehearsal. Savannah realized she could not secure her future with a real estate mogul using unanswered mail and blocked social media accounts. She needed a grand gesture. She needed to force a physical confrontation. Proving to Preston that she was willing to fight for her flesh and blood, she needed to look me in the eye and demand her property back. The groundwork was laid. The lies were fully established. And the phantom mother was about to step out of the shadows and onto my front porch, carrying an ultimatum that would push our silent war into the glaring light of day. April in Texas brings a heavy, humid heat that settles over the suburbs like a wet blanket. It was a Saturday afternoon, exactly 2 months before the high school graduation ceremony. Lily was at the municipal library with her debate team preparing for the state finals. I was alone in the house, standing at the kitchen island, sorting through a stack of property deeds for a Monday morning court filing. The neighborhood was quiet, filled with the hum of lawnmowers and the distant sound of children playing in sprinklers. Then the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, expecting the postal carrier or a neighborhood kid selling fundraiser chocolates. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the front door open. The humidity rushed in, carrying the scent of cut grass. But it was immediately overpowered by the sharp, undeniable scent of expensive sandalwood perfume. Savannah stood on my front porch. We had not stood face to face in nearly a decade. She wore a tailored white blazer and oversized designer sunglasses that shielded her eyes. Resting in the crook of her arm was a leather handbag that cost more than the down payment on my first car. It was a calculated display of wealth, a piece of armor designed to intimidate. She did not look like a sister dropping by for a weekend visit. She looked like a corporate liquidator arriving to close down a bankrupt factory. I stood in the doorway, my hand resting on the brass knob. I did not invite her inside. "Hello, Jasmine," she said. She reached up, pulling the sunglasses down to rest on top of her immaculate blowout. She offered a tight practice smile that did not reach her eyes. "We need to talk." Before I could formulate a response, she stepped forward, using the weight of her designer handbag to push past my shoulder. She walked into the foyer, her high heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. She was invading the sanctuary I had built. Treating my home like a showroom, she was inspecting for purchase. She wandered into the kitchen, running her manicured fingers along the edge of the granite counter. "Nice place," she noted, her tone dripping with quiet condescension. "A bit far from downtown, but quaint." I closed the front door and followed her into the kitchen. I did not offer her a glass of water. I did not ask her to sit down. I stood across the island, folding my arms over my chest. "State your business, Savannah. I have work to do." She sighed, an exaggerated exhalation designed to paint me as the unreasonable party. She dropped her heavy handbag onto my kitchen island. The gold hardware clinked against the stone. She folded her hands in front of her, slipping into a posture I recognized instantly. It was the stance of a negotiator presenting terms. She had clearly been studying her real estate mogul boyfriend. "Preston and I are getting serious," she announced as if delivering breaking news to the press. "He is a traditional man, Jasmine. He values legacy. He wants a ready-made family. And he wants to finalize our engagement by the end of the summer." I told him all about Lily. I stared at her, marveling at the sheer unadulterated delusion radiating from her tailored suit. "You told him about a daughter you have not spoken to in 17 years. Savannah waved her hand. swatting away the facts like a minor annoyance. I told him our family dynamic was complicated. I told him you stepped in to help when I was a vulnerable teenager. He thinks my resilience is inspiring. He wants to meet her. In fact, he wants us all to take a vacation to his cabin in Aspen right after she graduates high school. A bonding trip. The word bonding sounded grotesque coming from her lips. She was placing an order. She needed a teenage daughter to complete the picturesque diorama she was building for her wealthy Mark. And she expected me to simply hand over the inventory. Savannah leaned across the granite island. The sandalwood perfume was suffocating. I need you to step back. Jasmine, let me take the reins from here. You did a good job babysitting. I really mean that. You kept her fed and clothed. But Preston is offering a life you cannot provide. Private ski resorts. Ivy League connections. The country club circuit. She is my flesh and blood. It is time for her to come home to her real mother. Babysitting. The word hung in the quiet kitchen. 19 years of grinding bone. Deep exhaustion. 19 years of clipping coupons. Negotiating medical bills. Checking under the bed for monsters. And crying in the shower so my daughter would not see my fear. Savannah had reduced my entire existence to a temporary favor she could now dismiss with a patronizing nod and a ski trip. If I were a different woman, I would have screamed. I would have grabbed the expensive handbag and thrown it into the front yard. I would have shattered the quiet suburban afternoon with undeniable rage. But I was a senior paralegal. I dealt in facts. I dealt in paper. I did not yell. I did not blink. I turned away from the kitchen island and walked down the hallway. Savannah called after me, her voice spiking with irritation. Jasmine, do not walk away from me. We are adults. We are negotiating a transition. I ignored her. I walked into my bedroom, knelt on the carpet, and reached under the bed frame. My fingers found the cold steel of the fireproof safe. I spun the combination dial. 3 numbers. The heavy lock disengaged with a satisfying metallic click. I opened the door and bypassed the birth certificate, the social security card, and the immunization records. I reached for the very bottom file. It was a single sheet of paper. The thermal fax paper had yellowed slightly around the edges over the last 17 years. But the black ink was still crisp. The California notary stamp was perfectly legible. I stood up holding the document and walked back down the hallway. Savannah was still standing in the kitchen, tapping her manicured fingernails against the granite. She looked annoyed, checking her reflection in the dark screen of the microwave. When I stepped back into the room, she opened her mouth to continue her rehearsed monologue. I did not let her speak. I walked up to the island and slid the yellowed piece of paper across the smooth stone. It glided silently, stopping right under the gold hardware of her handbag. Savannah looked down. Her eyes scanned the bold header at the top of the page. Voluntary relinquishment of parental rights. I watched her face drop. The confident negotiating mask slipped, revealing the panicked, hollow reality underneath. She recognized her own looping signature at the bottom of the page. She recognized the date. You want to talk about flesh and blood, I said, my voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper. Let us talk about paper. You signed her away for a keg party. Savannah. She stared at the document, her mouth opening and closing silently. You did not want her when she had asthma. You did not want her when she needed braces. You did not want her when she was crying for a mother in the middle of the night. I leaned closer, planting my hands flat on the granite. You do not get to buy her back for a ski trip. Savannah snatched her hand back from the paper, as if the document were physically burning her. But Preston, she stammered, her voice losing its polished edge. Preston is expecting a family. If he finds out I signed this, he will call off the engagement. He thinks you stole her from me. That sounds like a terrible miscalculation on your part, I replied. I stepped around the aisle, picked up the yellowed paper, and folded it neatly. I walked over to the front door and pulled it open, letting the humid Texas air flood the foyer once again. Get out of my house, I said. Savannah picked up her leather handbag. Her knuckles were white. She walked toward the door, her high heels dragging against the floor. The confident corporate liquidator was gone. She looked like a desperate woman backed into a corner. When she reached the threshold, she stopped. She turned to face me one last time, her eyes narrowing with a desperate, venomous spite. You think a piece of paper stops me, Savannah hissed. Preston wants a family. Jasmine, he is a man who gets whatever he wants. Graduation is a public event. You cannot keep her hidden in this little suburban box forever. She is going to see exactly who her real mother is. She turned on her heel and marched down the driveway toward a black luxury sedan. Idling by the curb, I watched her climb into the passenger seat. I closed the front door, turned the deadbolt, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. Savannah thought she was delivering a threat. She believed she possessed the element of surprise. She assumed my brilliant, observant daughter was a passive pawn, waiting to be claimed on a public stage. She had no idea that Lily had been listening to her false narrative for months, quietly building a legal argument of her own. Savannah thought she was orchestrating a grand ambush for graduation day, entirely unaware that she was walking directly into a trap designed by the valedictorian herself. Savannah marched down my driveway, confident in her impending victory. She believed her threat carried weight. She assumed she held the element of surprise, picturing a graduation day where she could sweep in, dazzle a crowd with her wealth, and pluck her long-lost daughter from the bleachers. Her entire strategy relied on a fatal blind spot. She viewed teenagers as naive, pliable creatures, easily swayed by the promise of private cabins and designer labels. She did not understand that raising a child in the trenches of financial survival produces a very different kind of human. My daughter was not a passive pawn waiting to be rescued. Lily was a tactician. She possessed a razor-sharp intellect honed by years of watching me dissect legal briefs at the kitchen island. While Savannah spent the spring coordinating her country club wardrobe and spinning lies for her real estate mogul boyfriend, Lily was dismantling the Texas public school curriculum. Lily did not just get good grades. She conquered her district. She took every advanced placement course available, captained the mock trial team to a state victory, and spent her weekends volunteering at a legal aid clinic. She built an academic resume that read like a seasoned professional's portfolio. 2 weeks before Savannah showed up on my porch, the high school principal called my cell phone. He informed me that Lily had secured the highest grade point average in a graduating class of over 800 students. She was the valedictorian. That title came with a specific, undeniable power. It meant Lily was not just going to walk across the stage. She was going to stand at the podium. She was going to hold the microphone. Savannah did not know this. Brenda and Richard did not know this. My biological family remained entirely oblivious to the crowning achievement of my daughter's life because they never bothered to ask. They never checked the school website. They never called to inquire about her college applications. They were too busy orchestrating their own fictional narrative to check the reality of the situation. The true depth of Lily's awareness revealed itself a few days after Savannah delivered her ultimatum. It was late on a Thursday evening, exactly 1 week before the graduation ceremony. The house was quiet. Rain tapped gently against the windows. I walked into my home office to retrieve a charger cable. The room smelled of fresh ink and old paper. My laser printer sat on the corner desk, the green light blinking rhythmically. Resting on the output tray was a single warm stack of paper. Lily had been finalizing her college admissions portfolios all week. I assumed she had printed a standard cover letter or a scholarship application. I picked up the stack to place it in her designated folder. My eyes caught the bold centered text at the top of the first page. It was an essay draft. The title read, "The Mother Who Stayed." I stood in the quiet hum of my office, rooted to the floor. I did not mean to intrude on her privacy. But the opening sentence grabbed me by the throat and refused to let go. I leaned against the edge of the desk and began to read. Over the course of 1,000 words, my 19-year-old daughter unspooled the entire architecture of our lives. She did not write about academic theories or abstract concepts. She wrote about the visceral, grounded reality of our survival. She detailed memories I thought she was too young to comprehend. She wrote about the cold January morning I walked into a pharmacy with a negative bank balance to secure her asthma inhaler. She described the exact shade of the faded carpet in our first ground-floor apartment near the highway. She wrote about the Christmas morning she tore into presents wrapped in the Sunday comic section of the newspaper, noting that she did not see poverty in that moment. She only saw a woman who refused to let a holiday pass without magic. Every quiet sacrifice I thought I had hidden. She had documented every late-night shift in the basement archives, every skipped meal so she could have fresh fruit, every tear I shed in the driver's seat of my car after dealing with my toxic parents. Lily saw all of it. She wrote about my fierce, uncompromising effort to shield her from a bloodline that viewed her as a mistake. Then I reached the final paragraph. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Lily had summarized the entire agonizing journey of her existence into 2 sentences. Biology is a biological accident. She wrote, "Motherhood is a brutal, beautiful choice." The paper trembled in my hands. The professional armor I wore every single day cracked wide open. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trying to stifle the sound. But a raw, broken sob tore through my chest. I wept. I cried for the exhausted 2-3-year-old girl who took a newborn from a hospital nurse. I cried for the fear, the isolation, and the relentless pressure of the past 2 decades. Most of all, I cried because the child I gave my life to save had turned around and saved me right back. I did not hear her walk down the hallway. Soft footsteps paused at the office doorway. I looked up through blurred vision. Lily stood there in her oversized pajamas, holding a mug of herbal tea. She looked at my face, then looked at the printed pages in my hand. She did not look embarrassed or angry that I was reading her private work. A soft, knowing smile touched the corners of her mouth. She set her tea down on a nearby bookshelf. She walked across the room, wrapped her arms around my shoulders, and pulled me into a tight embrace. She rested her chin on the top of my head, holding me together while I cried into the collar of her shirt. We stood there for a long time, the quiet hum of the printer providing the only soundtrack to our shared vindication. I pulled back, wiping my face with the back of my hand. Lily, this essay, it is a masterpiece. I had no idea you remembered the newspaper wrapping. I remember everything. Mom, she said, her voice steady and warm. I remember exactly who showed up, and I remember exactly who walked away. She reached out and wiped a stray tear from my cheek. Her dark eyes hardened, shifting from deep affection to a cold, calculating resolve. The tactical sniper had returned to her post. Savannah thinks she is going to walk into my graduation and run the show. Lily whispered. She thinks she can parade her new boyfriend around and claim credit for the finish line. Lily picked up the essay from my desk, tapping the edges against the wood to align the pages. She looked me dead in the eye. Just wait until you hear the graduation speech. Mom, I have got this. A chill ran down my spine. I realized in that precise moment that my sister was walking into a slaughter. Savannah had spent months spinning a fragile web of lies for her real estate mogul. She had laid the groundwork for a tragic reunion. She had ordered her expensive outfit and planned her dramatic entrance. But she had failed to account for the fact that the girl she abandoned was now the smartest person in the room. I had no idea the absolute nuclear bomb, my 9-year-old, was about to drop on the Griffin family. But I knew I was going to secure a front row seat to watch the fallout. If you have ever had a toxic family member, try to swoop in and take credit for your hard work. Drop a red flag emoji in the comments right now, because the reckoning is coming. The morning of the ceremony arrived with a suffocating heat, bringing with it a frantic phone call from my mother that confirmed exactly how far they were willing to push their delusional theater. High school graduation in the state of Texas is not merely an academic ceremony. It is a sprawling high-stakes pageant of survival, endurance, and social standing. By 7 inches the morning, the late May temperature had already breached 90 degrees. The air hung thick and unyielding, carrying the distinct heavy scent of hot asphalt and impending rain. Inside our quiet suburban home, the central air conditioning hummed a steady, reliable rhythm against the oppressive humidity pressing against the windows. I stood in the kitchen, nursing a ceramic cup of black coffee, watching my 9-year-old daughter prepare for her coronation. Lily stood near the dining table, wielding a handheld clothing steamer against the dark fabric of her navy blue graduation gown. She moved with a practiced, methodical grace. She did not exhibit the frantic, nervous energy typical of teenagers facing a monumental life transition. She was focused. She wore a simple white sundress beneath the gown, her dark hair pinned back to combat the heat she would soon face on the stadium field. I admired the fierce, unshakable young woman standing before me, knowing full well the theatrical storm heading our way. At exactly 8:00, the morning silence shattered. My cell phone vibrated against the granite island, the harsh buzzing sound echoing off the tile backsplash. The caller identification displayed my mother's name. Brenda rarely called before noon unless she needed to deliver a mandate or correct a perceived slight. I considered sending the call straight to voicemail, preserving our morning peace and protecting our focus. But a lingering instinct, a primal need to know the opposing side's battle plan, prompted me to swipe the screen. I pressed the speaker icon, allowing the audio to fill the open kitchen. Jasmine Brenda began. Her tone dripped with a practiced saccharine sweetness that masked a spine of unforgiving steel. It was the same voice she utilized at country club charity galas when she wanted to insult a rival committee member while maintaining a flawless, camera-ready smile. I am calling to confirm the logistics for this morning. Savannah is bringing Preston today. They are flying in from Dallas on his private charter, so they will be arriving at the stadium directly. I need to make sure we are all on the same page. I leaned against the counter, offering no verbal response. Brenda did not require participation or dialogue in these moments. She required blind compliance. Do not embarrass us today, my mother continued, her voice dropping its sweet facade and hardening into a sharp command. Preston is a man of traditional conservative values. He expects to see a united front. Savannah is going to secure seats in the VIP front row section. She has arranged for a professional photographer to document the occasion, and she is bringing a very special custom cake for the post-ceremony celebration photos. Listening to her outline the itinerary, I felt a familiar, chilling sense of déjà vu. Decades earlier, Brenda had managed Savannah's high school cheerleading competitions with the exact same ruthless precision. She would dictate seating arrangements, coordinate matching outfits, and ensure the cameras captured only the most flattering angles of her golden child. Now, Brenda was attempting to stage manage my daughter's academic triumph, treating a valedictorian address as a convenient backdrop for Savannah's desperate engagement campaign. My mother viewed Lily not as a graduating scholar, but as a crucial prop in a high-stakes real estate merger. Let your sister have her moment with her daughter. Jasmine. Brenda commanded, the audacity of her words ringing through my kitchen. You did your part babysitting. Now it is time to step aside and let Savannah present her restored family to her future husband. I expect you to sit quietly in the stands and smile for the photographs. Do we have an understanding? I looked across the kitchen island. Lily had stopped moving the steamer. The hiss of the hot vapor filled the silence, a physical manifestation of the tension in the room. She stood perfectly still, listening to the woman who had ignored her existence for 19 years. Demand the spotlight. I braced myself, expecting Lily to flush with anger, drop the appliance in frustration, or demand I defend our honor. Instead, Lily turned her head and looked directly at me. The corners of her mouth lifted. It was a terrifying, brilliant smile. It was the exact expression I wore in the courtroom when opposing counsel walked blindfolded into a perjury trap I had spent weeks setting. My daughter possessed the emotional discipline of a veteran trial lawyer. She did not yell. She did not argue with the demanding voice emanating from the phone speaker. Lily stepped closer to the granite island, leaning down toward the microphone of the cell phone. Tell Grandma. We cannot wait to see the cake, Lily said. Her voice was bright, steady, and dangerously polite. I tapped the red button on the screen, cutting the connection before Brenda could process the sheer confidence radiating from her granddaughter's voice. The line went dead. We stood in the kitchen, the heavy weight of the impending confrontation settling between us. We did not dissect the phone call. We did not rehearse a counterattack or express our outrage. The strategy was already locked in place, printed on a piece of paper folded inside Lily's pocket. I rinsed my coffee mug and placed it in the dishwasher. Lily unplugged the steamer, draped her crisp navy blue gown over her arm, and picked up the small velvet box containing her valedictorian medal. We walked out the front door, locking the deadbolt behind us. The Texas heat immediately hit our skin, wrapping around us like a physical reminder of the pressure cooker awaiting us at the football stadium. We climbed into my sedan. I turned the ignition key, turning the air conditioning dial to its highest setting to combat the oppressive humidity. The drive to the high school athletic complex took 20 minutes. We rode in total silence. It was not a nervous, fearful quiet, born of intimidation. It was the focused, impenetrable silence of two soldiers heading to the front lines, reviewing their tactical maneuvers one final time. I watched the familiar suburban landscape blur past the window, reflecting on the long, grueling journey that had brought us to this exact morning. I thought about the nights spent eating cheap ramen noodles, the shifts worked in the basement archives, and the pediatric bills paid with loose change. I thought about the woman flying in on a private charter bringing a bakery cake to claim a prize she never trained for. The contrast between our reality and their fiction was staggering. As we approached the sprawling athletic complex, the sheer magnitude of the event came into view. The parking lots were a sea of gleaming metal, reflecting the harsh morning sun. Thousands of parents, grandparents, and siblings streamed toward the towering concrete entrance gates, carrying floral bouquets, foil balloons, and loud air horns. Uniformed security guards directed traffic at the intersections, waving bright orange batons to keep the chaotic flow of vehicles moving. I found a parking spot near the outer perimeter of the campus, far from the VIP areas Brenda coveted. I turned off the engine and gripped the steering wheel, taking one deep, stabilizing breath. Somewhere inside, that towering concrete structure. My sister was orchestrating a theatrical performance designed to erase 19 years of my unconditional sacrifice. She believed she held the winning hand, backed by old money designer suits and my mother's relentless social engineering. I looked over at Lily. She was sitting in the passenger seat, calmly adjusting the gold tassel on her graduation cap using the sun visor mirror. Her face was a mask of serene determination. She opened the car door. Stepping out onto the hot asphalt, I followed her lead. We locked the car and joined the river of families, walking toward ready to step into the arena and dismantle the Griffin family illusion piece by piece. The stage was set. The audience was taking their seats, and the grand entrance of the Golden Child was imminent. The stadium was a cauldron of sound and heat. Navigating the concrete steps required dodging stray toddlers, discarded programs, and clusters of parents, staking their claims with blankets and stadium seats. I found my designated spot in the fourth row, directly facing the wooden podium erected on the 50-yard line. The metal bleacher warmed the fabric of my dress. Around me, the affluent residents of our suburban district settled in. These were families built on tech money and medical practices. They carried expensive digital cameras and ordered custom floral leis for their graduates. I sat among them, a single working professional who had fought tooth and nail for a mortgage in this specific zip code, strictly to ensure my daughter could access this caliber of public education. 10 minutes remained before the traditional marching band procession. The stadium speakers crackled, broadcasting a tiny instrumental track to build anticipation. I checked my watch, keeping my breathing even. Then a distinct ripple of movement caught my eye at the top of the main central aisle. Savannah made her entrance. She did not walk into the stadium like a parent attending a school function. She descended the concrete stairs like a celebrity stepping onto a festival red carpet. She wore a tailored white silk suit that caught the morning sun, reflecting the light so sharply it hurt to look directly at her. The crisp fabric remained magically unwrinkled despite the humidity. Her hair fell in perfect, deliberate waves. She clung tightly to the arm of her fiancé, Preston. Preston carried himself with the insulated ease of generational wealth. He wore a lightweight linen sport coat and a genuine relaxed smile. He possessed the confident posture of a man who spent his life acquiring distressed commercial properties and turning them into profitable ventures. Savannah had convinced him that her arranged teenage daughter was simply another distressed asset, waiting to be rescued and rehabilitated under his generous roof. He looked around the stadium, nodding politely to strangers, oblivious to the venomous reality of the woman gripping his bicep. He truly believed he was facilitating a beautiful, long overdue family reunion. But the most arresting part of the spectacle was not Savannah or her wealthy Mark. It was the woman walking 2 steps behind them. My mother, Brenda, navigated the steep stadium stairs, carrying a sprawling, oversized cardboard bakery box. The logistics of maneuvering a half-sheet cake through a crowded high school athletic facility highlighted the absurdity of their plan. Brenda wore a floral dress and a strained, tight smile, balancing the heavy cardboard structure on both forearms. The lid of the box was folded back intentionally, displaying the contents to every single person they passed. It was a gaudy, chaotic display of sugar and manipulation. The cake featured a bright border of rosettes and a shimmering edible glitter finish. Plastered across the center in giant hot pink icing were 7 words designed to rewrite history. Congratulations, Lily. From your real mom. Savannah slowed her pace, intentionally bottlenecking the aisle. She paraded that baked good past the local doctors, the neighborhood association presidents, and the PTA board members. She pointed to the cake, offering tragic, brave smiles to anyone who made eye contact. She was marking her territory. She was broadcasting a narrative to our entire affluent suburb. ensuring the rumor mill would spin a tale of a devoted mother fighting to reclaim her stolen child. It was a calculated visual assault. They reached the very front row. Savannah had clearly utilized her country club connections to bypass the standard first come, first serve seating policy. A velvet rope sectioned off 6 premium seats directly behind the chain-link fence, separating the bleachers from the turf. She slid into the center seat. Pulling Preston down beside her, Brenda placed the heavy bakery box onto the empty metal bench next to them, guarding the hot pink frosting like a priceless artifact. From my vantage point, 3 rows behind them, I had a clear, unobstructed view of the back of Savannah's head. She leaned into Preston's shoulder, whispering into his ear and pointing a manicured finger toward the empty wooden podium on the field. She touched her chest, pantomiming overwhelmed emotion. Preston patted her knee, offering silent, sturdy support. They were playing house. They were performing a flawless rendition of the traditional loving family unit, awaiting the triumphant return of their prodigal scholar. I did not tap Savannah on the shoulder. I did not throw a crumpled program at her pristine white jacket. I did not raise my voice to contest the toxic message written in neon sugar sitting just feet away from me. I sat perfectly still. I folded my hands quietly in my lap, feeling the smooth leather of my purse strap against my palms. The people sitting in my row cast curious glances between the front row spectacle and my silent posture. They recognized the shared facial features between Savannah and me. They read the icing. They sensed the heavy, unspoken friction radiating from our section of the bleachers. I offered them nothing. I kept my chin level and my eyes focused straight ahead. Watching the empty green field, I knew any reaction from me would serve as fuel for Savannah's victim narrative. She wanted me to snap. She needed me to act like the bitter, jealous sister to validate the lies she had fed to Preston. My quiet observation allowed me to study the architecture of her trap. Savannah was relying on the weight of public expectation. She banked on the idea that neither Lily nor I would risk creating a humiliating scene in front of 3,000 witnesses. She expected us to bow our heads, accept the cake, and pose for the photographs to maintain a polite social facade. She weaponized our dignity, assuming our desire to protect Lily's special day would force our compliance. A sudden shift in the atmosphere broke my focus. The crackling instrumental music, fading from the stadium speakers, signaled the imminent start of the ceremony. The distant, rhythmic thumping of snare drums echoed from the locker room tunnels. The graduating class was preparing to march. Savannah checked the gold watch on her wrist. She uncrossed her legs and stood up, smoothing the front of her white trousers. She whispered another quick sentence to Preston. Leaving her designer handbag on her seat to reserve her space, she turned away from the field and began walking briskly against the flow of the crowd, navigating the narrow space between the bleachers and the chain-link fence. She headed directly toward the roped-off staging area where the graduates were currently lining up in alphabetical order. My pulse ticked upward. The front row display was only the first phase of her operation. She was not content to simply wait for Lily to walk across the stage. Savannah was moving to intercept her, launching a direct A2. Unavoidable physical ambush in the aisles before the ceremony even began. The familiar rhythmic thumping of snare drums began to echo off the towering concrete walls of the stadium. The high school brass section launched into the opening notes of the traditional graduation march. The music swelled a slow and steady cadence, designed to signal the end of childhood and the beginning of a profound new chapter. For the thousands of families sitting in the sweltering heat, it was a moment of deep, tearful pride. They clapped in time with the music, raising their cell phones to record the procession. For me, sitting quietly in the fourth row, the blaring horns sounded like a starting gun. Down in the VIP section, Savannah did not wait for the procession to officially begin. I watched her slip out of her premium velvet rope seat, leaving Preston sitting next to Brenda and the guarded bakery box. She moved with deliberate, striking purpose. She was not heading toward the concession stands to buy a bottle of water. She walked parallel to the chain-link fence, her pristine white silk trousers brushing against the metal, marching straight toward the restricted holding area, where the graduating class was queuing in alphabetical order. The student staging zone was heavily restricted, cordoned off by thick yellow nylon ropes. A faculty member and a uniformed campus security officer stood at the entrance, checking identification lanyards to ensure anxious parents did not flood the staging area and disrupt the flow of the ceremony. Savannah did not slow her pace. She approached the unformed guard, squared her shoulders, and leaned in. Though the roar of the crowd masked her exact words, her body language broadcasted pure, unearned authority. She flashed a blinding, entitled smile. She gestured elegantly toward the front of the student line, then touched her own chest. She was weaponizing her aesthetic, utilizing the expensive cut of her designer suit and the weight of her diamond jewelry to intimidate a high school employee earning an hourly wage. The guard hesitated, shifting his weight and shaking his head. Savannah leaned closer, pointing toward the field with a look of frantic maternal urgency. I knew the exact phrase she wielded to bypass that checkpoint. I am the mother of the valedictorian. The guard folded under the pressure of her perceived status. He unhooked the nylon rope, stepping aside to let her pass into the restricted zone. She did not enter the staging area alone. A man carrying a heavy professional camera with a prominent flash attachment followed right on her heels. Savannah had not merely brought a wealthy boyfriend and a custom dessert to this arena. She had hired a freelance photographer to document her fabricated reunion, ensuring she possessed high-define proof of her maternal devotion to show Preston later that evening. The graduating class looked identical in their flowing navy blue academic regalia. But Lily was easy to locate. As the valedictorian, she had earned the right to lead her peers onto the turf. She stood at the very front of the procession, adjusting the heavy gold honor cords draped around her neck, chatting quietly with the salutatorian. She looked radiant, focused, and entirely ready to claim her hard-earned diploma. Savannah struck like a predatory bird. She did not offer a tentative greeting. She did not tap Lily on the shoulder to announce her presence. She swept in from the blind side, throwing both arms around my daughter's shoulders in a sudden enveloping embrace. From my vantage point in the bleachers, the physical contrast was jarring. The stark white silk of Savannah's jacket pressed forcefully against Lily's dark, solemn graduation gown. Savannah turned her face toward the VIP section, angling her profile perfectly for the hired photographer, ensuring the stadium lights caught the elegant contours of her face. Then she projected her voice, pitching it to cut clearly through the low rumble of the crowd and the marching band instruments. "Mommy is so proud of you," of the word echoed in the humid air. A vile theft of a title she had surrendered in a shipping store almost 2 decades prior. She squeezed Lily tighter, resting her cheek against the flat top of Lily's graduation cap, presenting the ultimate picture of overwhelming maternal joy. The camera flash strobed repeatedly, capturing the curated lie in rapid succession. Sitting in the bleachers, my hands gripped the edge of the metal bench. Every protective instinct in my body screamed at me to jump the chain-link fence, march over to that staging area, and pry my sister off my child. I wanted to shield Lily from the suffocating weight of that performative hug, but I stayed anchored to my seat. I forced my hands to relax. I had to trust the fierce, pragmatic young woman I had raised. Any typical teenager ambushed by a stranger claiming to be her mother would have panicked. A normal high school student might have shoved the woman away, shouted for security, or burst into tears of frustration. Savannah banked on that predictability. She was counting on either a messy emotional breakdown that she could frame to Preston as teenage rebellion or a forced polite surrender to avoid a public scene. She severely underestimated the girl she abandoned. Lily did not flinch. She did not pull away. Nor did she return the hug. Her posture went entirely rigid, her spine locking into a straight, unyielding line. She allowed Savannah to drape over her, but she refused to participate in the charade. Lily turned her face directly toward the camera lens. She did not offer a smile. She did not offer anger. She offered a look of such chilling, hollow detachment that the resulting photograph would resemble a hostage-proof of life picture rather than a joyful family portrait. Her dark eyes were vacant, reflecting nothing but cold, analytical endurance. She understood the assignment. She let Savannah finish the theatrical performance without uttering a single syllable, holding the pose for 5 agonizing seconds to ensure the photographer captured multiple frames. Savannah finally released her grip, satisfied with her harvested content. She patted Lily's cheek in a condescending, performative gesture. "I will see you right after the ceremony, darling." Savannah trilled loud enough for the surrounding students to hear. She turned on her heel and strutted back toward the velvet ropes. The photographer trailing behind her like a beautiful shadow, Lily stood alone at the front of the line. The surrounding students exchanged confused whispers, shifting uncomfortably in their gowns. Lily ignored them. She reached up, smoothed the lapel of her gown where Savannah had wrinkled the fabric, and adjusted her heavy gold cords. Then she lifted her chin and scanned the crowded bleachers. It took her only a moment to find me in the 4th row. Across the expanse of the track, through the humid air and the chaos of 3,000 spectators. Our eyes locked. I held my breath, needing to know if the physical ambush had rattled her resolve. Lily looked at me, her expression a mask of pure tactical serenity. She gave me a single slow nod. The trap was armed. Savannah returned to her premium seat, sliding next to Preston, whispering excitedly about the emotional connection she had just forged. She pointed to the camera, assuring him that beautiful pictures were on the way. She believed she had won the opening skirmish. She believed the narrative was firmly under her control. She had no idea that the silent, rigid girl she had just used for a photo opportunity was walking toward a microphone with a script designed to scorch the earth. The principal stepped up to the wooden podium. The marching band played the final chord. And the real reckoning was about to begin. The graduation ceremony crawled forward at a punishing pace. For an entire hour, the Texas sun climbed higher into the cloudless sky, baking the aluminum bleachers and turning the stadium into a sweltering oven. Parents fanned themselves with rolled-up programs, desperate for a breeze that never arrived. The air smelled of melting sunscreen and hot turf. Down on the field, rows of teenagers shifted uncomfortably in their heavy polyester gowns, their faces flushed from the rising temperature. I sat in the 4th row, ignoring the sweat beading on my neck. My focus anchored entirely on the wooden stage at the 50-yard line. To endure a high school commencement is to survive an endurance test of administrative vanity. The school board president delivered a meandering address about seizing the day. The district superintendent followed with a dry recitation of standardized test scores and civic duty. It was a parade of generic platitudes, the kind of speeches designed to be forgotten the moment the speaker stepped away from the microphone. Throughout this droning procession, the occupants of the VP section put on a masterclass in theatrical distraction. I watched the back of Savannah's white silk jacket. She could not sit still. Every time a speaker mentioned the word family or sacrifice, Savannah would lean heavily against Preston's shoulder. She would reach up and press a manicured finger beneath her designer sunglasses, pantomiming the delicate removal of a tear. Preston would respond by wrapping his arm around her waist, offering the sturdy, protective comfort of a man who believed he was holding a fragile, grieving mother. Brenda sat beside them, gripping the edges of the pink bakery box as if it contained the crown jewels. She occasionally leaned over to whisper to Preston, undoubtedly feeding him fabricated anecdotes about Savannah's teenage years or praising her resilience. They were constructing an alternate reality right in front of 3,000 sweating spectators. They were so consumed by their own performance, so confident in their scripted narrative, they failed to notice the storm gathering on the field. Finally, the principal approached the podium. He adjusted his glasses and leaned into the microphone. His voice cutting through the humid air, the restless crowd quieted. Sensing the shift in the program, we had reached the apex of the academic ceremony. It is now my distinct honor to introduce a student who exemplifies the highest standards of our district, the principal announced. His words echoed off the concrete walls of the stadium. This young woman is a state debate champion, a national merit scholar, and a tireless advocate in our community. She has earned the highest grade point average in the history of this institution. Please welcome your valedictorian, Lily Griffin. The stadium erupted. The sound was deafening, a wave of genuine thunderous applause rolling down from the bleachers. Students on the field stood up, cheering for the girl who had tutored them through calculus and led their mock trial team to victory. I remained seated, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, my chest tight with a pride so profound, it ached. Down in the premium section, Savannah launched into the climax of her act. She sprang to her feet before the applause even peaked. She clapped her hands above her head, ensuring the movement caught the attention of the surrounding rows. She turned slightly, offering her profile to the hired photographer kneeling near the track. She gripped Preston's hand, pulling him to his feet alongside her. She nodded to the people sitting nearby, her bright, glossy smile projecting a single, undeniable message. That is my daughter. She wanted every local business owner, every country club rival, and every affluent parent to witness her triumphant maternal joy on the field. Lily rose from her folding chair. She did not rush. She moved with the deliberate, measured cadence of a seasoned litigator walking toward a jury box. The hot wind caught the hem of her navy blue gown, making the fabric billow around her ankles. The heavy gold honor cords draped over her shoulders caught the midday sun flashing like armor. She climbed the short wooden staircase to the stage, her posture straight and unyielding. She reached the center of the platform and stopped behind the wooden podium. She reached out and adjusted the microphone, bending the flexible metal stock downward to meet her height. The applause began to taper off, the crowd settling back onto the hot aluminum benches, ready to hear a polite, inspiring speech about reaching for the stars and embracing the future. Lily reached into the pocket of her gown. She retrieved a neatly folded stack of thick, high-quality paper. It was the school-approved draft, the exact speech she had submitted to the faculty advisors 2 weeks prior. The pages were covered in standard expected rhetoric. She unfolded the document and placed it flat on the slanted surface of the podium. Savannah was still standing in the front row. She was the only person in the VIP section who remained on her feet. She leaned forward against the chain-link fence, her white suit gleaming, waiting for her moment of validation. She expected Lily to look down, see the supportive, wealthy mother she had been missing, and weave a tearful acknowledgement into her opening remarks. Lily did not look at the paper. She lifted her chin and looked out at the sea of 3,000 faces. Her dark, calculating gaze swept across the stadium, moving past the faculty, past the sea of navy blue caps, and locking directly onto the VIP section. She stared straight at the woman in the white silk suit. Then Lily raised her hands. She picked up the school-approved speech. She grasped the thick stack of paper with both hands, holding it high enough for the entire front section to see. Her knuckles went white. With a single, sharp, and deliberate motion, she ripped the document straight down the middle. The sound of tearing paper was amplified by the microphone, a harsh tearing noise that cut through the humid air like a physical strike. She did not stop. She placed the halves together and ripped them again. She held the shredded pieces of her sanitized, polite future over the edge of the podium and simply opened her hands. The torn fragments fluttered down, drifting like dead leaves landing on the green turf below the stage. The stadium went dead silent. It was not a gradual quieting. It was an instant, breathless vacuum. San. 000. People inhaled at the exact same moment and forgot to exhale. The faculty members sitting behind Lily froze in their chairs. The principal gripped the armrests of his seat, his mouth hanging slightly open. In the front row, the transformation was staggering. Savannah's bright, performative smile froze, turning brittle and tight. Her hands, which had been resting proudly on the chain-link fence, slowly lowered to her sides. The pristine illusion she had spent months building began to fracture under the weight of that silence. Beside her, Preston shifted his weight. His relaxed, confident posture vanished. He looked at the shredded paper on the grass, then looked at Savannah, his brow furrowing in deep, unsettling confusion. He was a man who negotiated million-dollar contracts, and he recognized immediately that the script had just changed. Brenda, sitting right behind them, shrank back into her seat. She reached out and placed a trembling hand on the lid of the bakery box, as if the hot pink frosting could somehow shield her from the incoming fire. The silence stretched heavy and dangerous. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a catastrophic storm. Lily let them sit in it. She let the tension build until it was almost unbearable, commanding the attention of every single breathing soul in that athletic complex. She owned the arena. Lily leaned closer to the microphone. Her voice, when she finally spoke, did not tremble. It did not shake with teenage nerves or unresolved grief. It rang out with the crisp, undeniable authority of a prosecutor delivering an opening statement. I had a speech about the future, Lily said. Her words echoed off the metal bleachers, ringing clear and sharp in the stifling heat. I spent 3 weeks writing about paths moving forward and the value of looking ahead. She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the crowd before bringing it back to rest on the woman in the white suit. But today, I need to talk about the past and about a woman who saved my life. The trap had officially snapped shut. Savannah had marched into the stadium believing she held the power to dictate the narrative, convinced that a public setting would force our quiet compliance. She failed to realize that a public setting was exactly what my daughter needed. Lily was not going to hide the ugly, toxic history of our family behind closed doors. She was going to drag it into the unforgiving light of the midday sun, using the very audience Savannah had cultivated to dismantle her lies piece by piece. The reckoning was no longer a threat, whispered in a suburban kitchen. It was happening right now, broadcast through the stadium speakers. And nobody could look away. The torn pieces of the school-approved speech fluttered down to the green turf, and the stadium held its collective breath. Lily did not adjust her graduation cap. She did not clear her throat or betray a single ounce of hesitation. She leaned into the microphone, gripping the edges of the wooden podium with steady hands. 19 years ago, Lily began. Her voice rang out across the athletic complex, amplified by the towering speakers carrying a crisp, commanding cadence that demanded total attention. A 7-year-old girl gave birth to me. She decided I was an inconvenience to her social life, and she abandoned me to go to college parties. The reaction was visceral and immediate. A collective gasp rippled through the sea of 3,000 spectators. It started in the front rows and washed upward through the aluminum bleachers like a physical wave. Parents lowered their digital cameras. Faculty members sitting behind the podium exchanged wide-eyed, panicked glances. The principal gripped his program, paralyzed by the sudden deviation from the printed schedule. Down in the premium VIP section, the effect was catastrophic. The pristine, confident mask Savannah had worn all morning shattered into a million irreparable pieces. I watched from the fourth row as the blood drained entirely from her face, leaving her complexion and ashen, sickly gray beneath her designer sunglasses. The blinding white silk suit she wore suddenly ceased to look like a halo of triumph, and instead transformed into a glaring target. She sat frozen, her jaw slack, unable to process the reality that her carefully constructed narrative was being dismantled on a public stage. Beside her, Preston reacted with the sharp, calculated instincts of a seasoned executive. He was a man who built an empire on thorough inspections and honest disclosures. In the span of a few seconds, the cognitive dissonance between the tragic, victimized woman he thought he was marrying and the cold, factual history being broadcast over the public address system reconciled in his mind. Preston stiffened. His posture went rigid. He did not yell or cause a scene, but his physical withdrawal was devastating. He pulled his arm out from behind Savannah's shoulders. He unclasped his hand from hers and leaned away, creating a distinct, deliberate gap of negative space between them on the metal bench. He turned his head, staring at the woman he had flown in on a private charter, looking at her as if she were a stranger who had just tried to sell him a fraudulent deed. Lily did not pause to let them recover. She owned the rhythm of the moment, pressing her advantage with surgical precision. For 19 years, Lily continued her voice, echoing off the concrete walls. My biological mother never sent a birthday card. She never attended a parent-teacher conference. She never paid a single medical bill. She spent 2 decades living 2,000 away, funded by an endless bank account, pretending I did not exist. The quiet shock of the crowd began to curdle into something else. The whispering started. It was a low, buzzing murmur that swiftly escalated into a dull, undeniable roar. The affluent residents of our suburban district, the very people Savannah had paraded past just 20 minutes earlier, began connecting the dots. They remembered the woman in the white suit bypassing the security checkpoint. They remembered the loud theatrical hug in the staging area. Heads began to turn. Hundreds of eyes swiveled away from the stage and locked directly onto the front row. They were staring at Savannah. The judgment was palpable. A heavy, suffocating weight pressing down on the VIP section. Lily raised her hand and pointed a single steady finger directly at the seats behind the chain-link fence. But today, Lily said, her tone dripping with an icy, unforgiving clarity, she is sitting in the front row with a man she lied to, holding a custom bakery cake that says, "From your real mom to pretend she raised me." The surgical strike landed with flawless accuracy. Lily had brought the physical evidence into the testimony. She directed the attention of the entire stadium to the gaudy hot pink frosting sitting on the metal bench behind Savannah. My mother began to unravel. Brenda realized her country club peers, the women she played tennis with and hosted for charity luncheons, were all staring at her. The cake, which was supposed to be the ultimate prop of their social victory, had just morphed into a neon sign of their deep, unforgivable deceit. Brenda scrambled. Her manicured hands shook as she grabbed the edges of the heavy cardboard box. She tried to push it off the bench, attempting to slide it under the seat to hide the hot pink lettering from view. She fumbled, bumping the box against the metal bleachers, smearing the icing against the cardboard in a desperate, humiliating scramble to erase the evidence of their hubris. Savannah slouched forward, burying her face in her hands. She was trapped. She could not run out of the stadium without confirming her guilt. And she could not sit there without enduring the scorching heat of public disgrace. The real estate mogul beside her stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, his expression a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust. Lily let the humiliation marinate. She stood at the podium, letting the roaring whispers of the crowd wash over the field. Then she lowered her hand. The hard prosecutorial edge in her voice softened, the coldness evaporated, replaced by a deep, resonant warmth that carried across the humid Texas air. "But my real mom is not sitting in the front row," Lily said. She shifted her gaze away from the wreckage of the VIP section. She looked up, scanning the bleachers until her dark eyes found mine in the fourth row. "My real mom is Jasmine Griffin," Lily announced. The crowd followed her gaze. Suddenly, the people sitting around me, the parents and neighbors who had watched me sit quietly throughout the morning, turned their heads. The attention of the stadium shifted away from the villains in the front and focused on the fourth row. "She is the woman who dropped everything at 23 years old to take me in," Lily continued, her voice trembling just slightly with genuine, unfiltered emotion. "She is the woman who worked double shifts in a windowless basement so I could have fresh fruit. She is the woman who wrapped my Christmas presents in the Sunday comics section of the newspaper because she could not afford wrapping paper and made it feel like the greatest magic in the world." Tears blurred my vision. The hot stadium air caught in my throat. I sat frozen on the aluminum bench, my hands covering my mouth, listening to my daughter validate every single quiet, exhausting sacrifice I had ever made. "She never asked for credit," Lily said, gripping the edges of the podium, looking only at me. "She never demanded a parade. She just woke up every single morning and chose me. She fought for me when the people who shared my DNA walked away." The whispering in the crowd had ceased entirely. People were openly crying. A woman sitting 2 seats down from me reached into her purse and handed me a tissue, her own eyes brimming with tears. Lily stood tall, adjusting the heavy gold honor cords draped over her shoulders. She delivered her closing statement with a fierce, undeniable finality. "Jasmine Griffin is my mother," Lily declared to the sky. "The rest is just biology." She stepped back from the microphone. She did not wait for the principal to dismiss her. She did not wait for the faculty to shake her hand. She turned around the navy blue fabric of her gown, sweeping across the wooden stage, and walked down the short flight of stairs to return to her seat among her peers. For a fraction of a second, the stadium remained trapped in a stunned, breathless silence. The sheer magnitude of what had just occurred hung suspended in the thick, humid atmosphere. The golden child had been publicly executed by her own offspring. The enabling grandmother had been exposed to her elite social circle, and the invisible discarded sister had been crowned before an audience of thousands. The tensions stretched, pulling tighter and tighter, preparing to snap into a chaotic, unprecedented aftermath that would force the real estate mogul to make a decisive, devastating exit. The fraction of a second after Lily turned her back to the microphone felt suspended in time. The stadium existed in a breathless vacuum, processing the sheer weight of the testimony they had just witnessed. Then a man sitting 2 rows behind me stood up. He brought his hands together in a slow, resounding clap. The woman next to him stood and joined the rhythm. Within 5 seconds, the sound fractured and multiplied, rolling across the aluminum bleachers like a freight train cresting a hill. The stadium did not merely applaud. It erupted. San. 0, 0, 0. People rose to their feet. The noise was a physical entity, vibrating through the metal panels beneath my shoes, shaking the humid Texas air. They were not cheering for a generic academic milestone. They were delivering a roaring, undeniable verdict. The sound washed over the turf, echoing off the concrete pillars, validating 19 years of quiet. Unseen labor, in a single deafening chorus. People sitting in my section turned away from the field and faced me. Strangers who had never spoken to me. Parents who had only ever seen me passing through school hallways were looking at me with profound respect. The woman who had handed me a tissue earlier reached out and squeezed my arm. I stood up. My knees shook. Hot tears streamed down my face, blurring the vibrant colors of the crowd. I raised my hand and waved to the fierce, brilliant young woman I had raised, watching her take her seat among her peers, with her head held high. While the upper bleachers celebrated total devastation unfolded in the premium VIP section below, the pristine illusion Savannah had spent months carefully constructing imploded in real time. The standing ovation served as a glaring, inescapable spotlight, illuminating her deceit. She remained slouched in her premium folding chair, her designer sunglasses failing to hide the ash and terror spreading across her face. She reached out, her manicured fingers trembling, attempting to grasp the arm of the man sitting beside her. She needed an anchor. She needed her wealthy fiancé to protect her from the scorn, radiating from the crowd. Preston did not offer his arm. He recoiled. He pulled his arm away from her touch with a sharp, involuntary flinch, as if her white silk jacket had suddenly caught fire. Preston was a man who navigated the cutthroat world of Dallas commercial real estate. He built his empire on thorough inspections, transparent disclosures, and binding contracts. He despised fraud. He had spent the last 6 months believing he was courting a tragic heroine, a woman who had been victimized by a cruel older sister and forced to surrender her child under duress. He had purchased the private charter flights, paid for the expensive dinners, and entertained the idea of a blended family based entirely on a fabricated premise. The cognitive dissonance cleared from his eyes, replaced by a cold, searing clarity. He realized he was the mark in a long con. Preston stood up. He did not rush. He moved with the terrifying, deliberate calm of a chief executive officer preparing to terminate a fraudulent employee. He reached up and buttoned the center button of his linen sport coat, a subtle gesture that signaled the formal conclusion of their association. He looked down at the woman cowering in the folding chair. Savannah stared up at him, her lips parting in a desperate, silent plea. She tried to formulate a defense, an excuse, a spin to mitigate the damage. But the deafening roar of the crowd drowned out her voice. Preston did not need to hear her excuses. He leaned down, placing his hands on the metal back rest of the chair in front of them, bringing his face level with hers. He did not shout. He did not need to raise his voice. He pitched his tone to a low, lethal register, carrying the cutting edge of a finalized verdict. "You told me they kidnapped her from you," Preston said, his voice slicing through the ambient noise, loud enough for the affluent parents sitting in the adjacent rows to hear every single syllable. "You sat in my home and cried, claiming your family stole your baby." Savannah shook her head frantically, reaching for his wrist. Please let me explain." And she begged, her polished exterior crumbling into pathetic desperation. "She is lying. She is just trying to humiliate me." Preston pulled his wrist out of her grasp. He stood back up to his full height, looking at her with a mixture of pity and unadulterated disgust. He possessed the critical thinking skills to recognize the truth when it was handed to him on a silver platter. He remembered the vague evasions whenever he asked for specific details about the past. He remembered her hesitation to initiate legal contact, the pieces of the puzzle locked into place. Forming a picture he found morally repulsive. "You faxed her away for a sorority," Preston stated, summarizing the brutal reality of her character in 8 devastating words. "We are done." He turned on his heel. He did not issue a formal goodbye to my mother. He did not retrieve the program resting on his seat. He simply walked away. He navigated the narrow gap between the front row seats and the chain-link fence, his strides long and decisive, moving against the current of the celebrating crowd. He was a man cutting his losses, executing a swift surgical exit from a bad investment. Savannah realized her entire future. The diamond ring, the Aspen cabin, the endless trust fund extension, was walking toward the stadium exit. Panic overrode her desire to maintain appearances. She abandoned her expensive leather handbag on the folding chair. "Preston." "Wait!" she screamed, her voice cracking in a shrill, undignified wail. She scrambled past the velvet ropes. Her high heels catching on the metal framing of the bleachers, she broke into a clumsy run, chasing him down the concrete aisle. As she reached the edge of the turf, one of her stilettos sank deep into the soft, humid grass. She stumbled forward, waving her arms to catch her balance. The pristine white silk trousers, the armor she wore to intimidate our suburb, dragged across the dirt and grass clippings, staining the fabric with dark green and brown streaks. She looked ridiculous. She looked like a desperate, frantic imposter, stripped of her protective, wealthy veneer. Preston reached the concrete tunnel leading out to the parking lots. He did not slow his pace. He did not turn around to look at the woman screaming his name. He walked into the shadows of the exit and disappeared. Severing their connection permanently, Savannah stood alone near the edge of the field, her ruined suit clinging to her sweating frame, her chest heaving as she realized the magnitude of her loss. Back in the premium seating section, a different kind of execution was taking place. Brenda sat frozen in her folding chair, entirely abandoned. The golden child she had protected and enabled for nearly 4 decades had just fled the scene, leaving her to face the social firing squad alone. The stadium applause began to transition into a loud buzzing chatter as the graduation ceremony resumed its schedule. But the attention of the VIP section remained fixed on my mother. Brenda was surrounded by the elite members of her country club. Women she played doubles tennis with, women she hosted for charity auctions, were staring at her. They did not offer sympathetic smiles. They exchanged knowing judgmental glances, whispering behind their printed programs. Brenda had spent her entire adult life curating an image of flawless upper crust respectability. She viewed teenage pregnancy as a dirty secret to be hidden, and she viewed me as a convenient rug to sweep it under. Now the rug had been pulled out, and the dirt was on full display. The affluent neighbors she tried so desperately to impress now knew she had participated in a cruel, negligent cover-up. They knew she had allowed her oldest daughter to shoulder the burden of motherhood while funding the frivolous lifestyle of the youngest. The ultimate symbol of her hubris rested right beside her. The heavy bakery box sat on the metal bench, baking in the relentless Texas sun. The shimmering edible glitter on the custom cake had begun to melt in the humidity. The hot pink frosting reading, "From your real mom," sagged and pulled against the cardboard base. Looking grotesque and absurd, Brenda stared down at the melting sugar. Her hands shook in her lap. She could not look up to meet the eyes of the women whispering around her. She was trapped in a prison of her own making, forced to sit in the sweltering heat, anchored to a ruined dessert that had just detonated her favorite daughter's life. The social standing she valued above her own flesh and blood dissolved right in front of her. mirroring the sagging, ruined icing on the bench. I watched her shrink into her seat from my vantage point in the fourth row. I felt no urge to gloat. I felt no desire to walk down the steps and offer a final cutting remark. The universe had delivered a consequence far more punishing than anything I could have designed. I turned my attention back to the stage, watching the rest of the graduates receive their diplomas. Feeling lighter than I had in 19 years, the heavy, suffocating weight of my family's delusions had finally lifted, paving the way for a triumphant exit that would sever our ties for good. The commencement concluded with the traditional tossing of the caps. A wave of navy blue fabric sailed into the humid Texas sky. Signaling the official end of the academic year, families immediately rushed the turf, eager to capture photographs under the tall metal goalposts. We opted out of that chaotic scramble. I met Lily at the edge of the running track. We did not exchange a single word of congratulations. The heavy electric energy transferring between us communicated everything necessary. We bypassed the crowded photo stations set up near the locker rooms. We possessed no desire to pose for 4 stiff pictures to mail to distant relatives who never checked on us. We simply wanted to exit the battlefield. We navigated the crowded concrete tunnels and emerged into the blinding afternoon sun. The asphalt parking lot radiated intense heat, shimmering in distorted waves across the vast expanse of vehicles. We walked toward my sedan, the joyous sounds of the marching band fading behind us. As we turned down the third row of parked cars, the final pathetic act of the Griffin family tragedy came into sharp focus. Parked near the perimeter stood Brenda's silver luxury sport utility vehicle. Leaning against the passenger side door was Savannah, the pristine, untouchable image of the wealthy socialite, had dissolved into a puddle of ruin. Her crisp white silk blazer bore dark green turf stains and streaks of brown dirt from her clumsy fall on the field. She had removed her designer high heels, standing barefoot on the scorching black pavement, uncaring of the burn. Her face rested in her hands, her shoulders heaving with ragged, unedited sobs. The engagement ring she had banked her entire existence on was gone, replaced by the grim reality of a 6-year-old woman with no career, 0 prospects, and a shattered reputation. She was experiencing a raw and unfiltered meltdown in the middle of a high school parking lot. Brenda stood a few feet away, clutching her electronic key fob, looking like a woman who had just watched her estate burn to the foundation. The country club armor she wore for 40 years had melted under the midday sun. Her expensive makeup streaked down her cheeks. When she noticed us approaching our vehicle, a desperate, frantic light flickered in her eyes. She needed to fix the unfixable. She needed to drag us back into the fold to repair the gaping hole in her social standing. Brenda left her favorite daughter crying against the car and walked swiftly in our direction. She did not lead with her usual sharp command. For the first time in my entire life, my mother approached me with a plea. "Jasmine, Lily, please wait," Brenda called out. Her voice sounded thin, stripped of its venomous authority. She stopped a few feet away, her hands trembling visibly, tears pulled in her eyes. Genuine tears born of sudden, inescapable public shame. She was finally tasting the exact humiliation she had projected onto me for nearly 2 decades. "Please," Brenda begged, her gaze darting frantically between me and my daughter. "Let us just go back to the house. Let us sit down and talk about this, as a family. We can fix this." I did not need to step forward to protect my daughter. Lily stood tall in her graduation gown. She reached up and calmly adjusted the gold valedictorian medal resting against her collarbone. She looked directly at the woman who had introduced her as a temporary mistake. "We are a family," Lily said. Her tone carried the cool, objective weight of a judge delivering a final sentence. "You are just the people we share DNA with. It was the most precise, devastating verbal strike I had ever witnessed. Brenda physically recoiled the breath, leaving her lungs as if she had been struck in the chest. There was no argument left to mount. Lily turned her back on her grandmother. She unlocked the passenger door, tossed her graduation cap into the back seat, and climbed inside. I walked around to the driver's side, sparing one final glance at the wreckage. Savannah was still weeping against the silver vehicle. Brenda stood frozen on the hot asphalt. A woman permanently trapped in a prison constructed from her own vanity. I got into my car, started the engine, and turned the air conditioning dial to its highest setting. We drove out of the athletic complex, leaving the golden child and her chief enabler alone in the heat to digest the consequences of their actions. They could return to the bleachers and eat their melted bakery cake by themselves. We drove away from the affluent suburbs, leaving the judgment-heavy zip code in our rearview mirror. I steered us toward downtown Dallas. We did not go home to eat leftovers. I handed my keys to the valet stand of a high-end traditional steakhouse. The interior offered a serene sanctuary, cool and dark, smelling of rich mahogany and roasted garlic. We sat in a curved leather booth, just the two of us. I ordered a prime ribeye. Lily ordered a filet mignon. We raised heavy crystal glasses of sparkling cider and toasted to survival, to the law and to the unbroken bond we had forged in the fire of their neglect. The story does not conclude at that restaurant table. Actions carry weight, and in the real world, competence eventually outweighs pedigree. 2 weeks after the ceremony, the receptionist at my law firm buzzed my office line. She informed me a courier had dropped off a certified envelope requiring my direct signature. I signed for the thick ivory parchment. The return address belonged to Preston's commercial real estate holding company. I opened it cautiously, expecting a legal threat or a cease and desist order generated by Savannah's desperate fallout. It was not a threat. It was a formal handwritten letter from Preston himself. He wrote to offer a profound, unreserved apology for bringing my sister into our lives and disrupting my daughter's milestone. He expressed a deep admiration for the integrity and courage Lily demonstrated on that stage. Tucked behind the letter was a certified cashier's check made out directly to Lily's university bursar office, covering her entire first year of tuition. Preston stated he refused to let a bright, honest mind carry a financial burden when he had been prepared to waste millions on a fraud. The envelope held one more item. It was a thick stack of commercial property contracts. Preston was transferring his entire corporate legal portfolio to my firm, explicitly requesting that I serve as the lead senior paralegal on his account. That single referral represented millions of dollars in billable hours. When I walked that lucrative portfolio into the managing partner's office, my career trajectory shifted permanently. Within a year, I was managing my own division, earning a salary that dwarfed the trust fund my parents wielded like a weapon. Savannah moved back into Brenda's guest bedroom. Officially blacklisted from the country club circuit, she worripped, serving a quiet, isolated sentence in the Dallas suburbs. Lily went off to college, unburdened by student loans and untethered from a toxic bloodline. We walked through the fire, and we emerged owning the ashes. If you are listening to this and wondering if you should walk away from the people holding you down, I take this story as your sign. Boundaries are not brick walls. They are the doors you walk through to find your actual life. Drop a heart in the comments if you agree, and share this with someone who needs to hear that biology does not dictate your worth. Thank you for listening to my story. Until next time, keep protecting your peace. Looking out the floor-to-ceiling window of my corner office in downtown Dallas, watching the late afternoon sun catch the steel frames of the skyline, I realize how serene my reality has become. It is a profound, hard-earned quiet, 4 years have elapsed since Lily stood on that graduation stage and dismantled a legacy of neglect with her own bare hands. Today, she sits in a lecture hall at a prestigious law school, dismantling legal precedents with that same fierce intellect. Her tuition is paid. Her credit is pristine. And her future belongs to no one but herself. Meanwhile, Savannah and Brenda remain trapped in their suburban exile, prisoners of a neighborhood that never forgot the melting bakery cake and the bitter truth it tried to conceal. I spent 2 decades navigating the trenches of single parenthood, operating under the assumption that I had to shield my daughter from the harsh reality of her origins. I was wrong. The fire I walked through did not burn her. It forged a woman capable of wielding the flames, reflecting on the sleepless nights, the agonizing financial calculations, and the ultimate public reckoning. I have extracted 5 undeniable truths. First, biology is merely a biological coincidence, never a mandate. DNA might sketch the outline of a family tree, but motherhood is a title earned through the relentless, gritty friction of showing up. A signature on a hospital document means nothing if the chair beside a sickbed remains empty. Second, children are silent, brilliant witnesses. We often trick ourselves into believing we can camouflage our sacrifices or sanitize toxic relatives to protect their innocence. We cannot. They see who holds their hand during an asthma attack, and they recognize exactly who treats them like a footnote at a holiday dinner. Third, an expensive wardrobe cannot mask a bankrupt character. Savannah believed white silk and a wealthy fiancé could effectively rewrite her history. But deception demands constant, exhausting maintenance. The truth simply waits for a microphone. Fourth, boundaries serve as the foundational architecture of self-respect. For years, I allowed my parents to dictate our worth foolishly, hoping my career milestones would finally purchase their affection. I learned that you cannot negotiate for respect. At a table where you are viewed as a prop, walking away is not an act of surrender. It is the strategic reclamation of your territory. Fifth, the most lethal response to betrayal is a thriving existence. We did not waste our precious bandwidth orchestrating their downfall. We spent our energy constructing an empire of our own. Authentic success rooted in integrity and quiet discipline forms a fortress that manipulation simply cannot penetrate. We built our family from the ground up utilizing generic groceries, shared sacrifices, and unbreakable loyalty. If you are listening to this while carrying the heavy burden of a bloodline that refuses to value your contributions, stop waiting for their applause. You hold the authority to walk out of their theater and construct your own stage. Thank you for spending your time with me today. If this narrative mirrored your own silent battles, or if you found a spark of courage in Lily's triumph, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below and share the hardest boundary you ever had to draw. We are building a community of survivors here. You are tuning in to Revenge Stories,